Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you're joining us for tonight's journey into history, where we explore a story filled with mystery and quiet resilience. Tonight, we'll be diving into a fascinating tale about how rats, those small, often overlooked creatures, managed to outlast the legendary gladiators of the Colosseum. Were they truly more resilient than the warriors who once fought for glory? Before we begin, if you enjoy these quiet escapes into history, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always a joy to see how far these calming stories travel. Now, let's settle in and start tonight's journey, uncovering the secrets of survival in the Colosseum. As you picture yourself standing at the heart of ancient Rome, the Colosseum rises before you, a monument to strength and glory. Its towering arches once framed the fierce battles fought beneath its roof, but today we look at it from a different angle. The city of Rome, magnificent in its scope, pulses with life. Narrow streets twist and turn, their cobblestones worn smooth from centuries of foot traffic, every crack in the stone a small story of time past. Above you, the sky is a deep blue, with the warmth of the sun filtering through the bustling markets, the quiet murmur of everyday life carrying on around you. The Colosseum, the grand arena that would witness countless spectacles, stands at the heart of it all. Built from stone, as solid and unyielding as the empire itself, its purpose was clear: to showcase Rome's might, to entertain, and, at times, to remind everyone who was in charge. As you look up at the Colosseum, its weathered facade tells a different story, one of quiet endurance. In its shadow, life goes on in much the same way. Vendors call out to passing crowds, their carts piled high with fruit and bread, while children race through the streets, their laughter ringing through the city. But beneath this bustling, vibrant city lies another layer of Rome, the one that doesn't often make it into the grand tales told by the historians. For every empire of men, there are the smaller, quieter stories that thrive in the shadows. And that, my friends, is where we begin our journey tonight. As we step further into the heart of ancient Rome, we can almost hear the distant hum of hammers and chisels. It was here, nearly 2,000 years ago, that the Colosseum began to take shape, a monumental task that would change the face of the city forever. Imagine the sounds of workers, their hands calloused from labour, tirelessly carving and stacking stone. The air would have been thick with the scent of fresh-cut stone, the dust swirling in the sunlight that filtered down into the vast construction site. Each stone, each piece of marble was carefully placed, one after another, until a magnificent structure began to rise from the earth. The Colosseum was not built overnight. It took nearly a decade to complete under the reign of Emperor Vespasian, and even then, it wasn't quite finished. It would take more years of work, more hands at work, and more stone added to reach its full, awe-inspiring glory. This was to be no ordinary building. The Colosseum would be a testament to the power of Rome, designed to showcase the strength and grandeur of the empire. And so, it was designed as a place where spectacles of all kinds could be held. Gladiatorial combat, mock naval battles, and even the occasional public execution. A place where the roar of the crowd could rise to a crescendo, a place where lives were gambled and fates were sealed. But, in its early days, it wasn't all about blood and battle. The Colosseum also served as a kind of grand stage, a place where Roman citizens could witness the might of their empire in action, where entertainment took on an almost sacred air. It was as much about civic pride as it was about spectacle. For Romans, it was more than just a building. It was a place where history was made, and where the stories of men and of rats would unfold in ways no one could have predicted. And so, with every stone placed, every archway carved, the Colosseum began to grow. Rising higher and higher, it became more than just a building. It became a symbol, one that would stand through the ages, echoing with the footsteps of warriors, emperors, and yes, even the small creatures that scurried in the shadows. As the day turns to dusk, the atmosphere inside the Colosseum begins to shift. A hum of anticipation fills the air, the low murmur of the crowd growing louder as they settle into their seats. The stone walls, weathered and aged, now stand silent, awaiting the spectacle that is about to unfold. The faint scent of sweat and leather mixes with the cool evening air, setting the stage for what's to come. In the distance, the sound of drums begins to echo, a steady beat that stirs the crowd, their restless energy palpable. Slowly the noise swells, building with every passing moment. The gates open and the gladiators, clad in shining armor and weapons, step onto the arena floor. Their footsteps, though heavy, are barely heard over the rising roar of the spectators. There's something almost hypnotic about it, the rhythm of the crowd, their collective breath held in unison, waiting for the first clash of metal. The gladiators move into position, muscles tense, eyes scanning the arena. And then, as if on cue, the air is filled with the deafening sound of 1,000 voices, a collective roar that seems to shake the very ground beneath you. The shouts of the crowd echo through the stone arches, bouncing off the walls, growing in intensity. Their eyes are fixed on the fighters below, every swing of the sword, every movement of the gladiators met with cheers and gasps. The adrenaline of the moment is contagious, even to those watching from the farthest reaches of the stands. It's strange, really. The crowd, so full of life, so eager for battle, and yet, what were they really witnessing? Was it a fight for survival, or simply an elaborate form of entertainment? A display of strength, of courage, or perhaps it was something simpler, just a moment of escape, a chance to cheer, to feel alive in the presence of something larger than themselves. For the gladiators, the stakes were clear. Their lives hung in the balance with every strike, every step taken on the sand of the arena. But for the crowd, it was all about the spectacle, and in this grand arena, where death and glory intertwined, they found their thrills in the roar of the moment, and as the battle rages on, the noise of the crowd continues to build, almost as if it were its own living, breathing entity. Each cheer, each shout, pulses through the Colosseum like a heartbeat, filling the space with a rhythm that seems to grow louder with each passing second. It's a curious thing, really, how such a simple primal act could stir such passion in the hearts of so many. In the end, it wasn't just the gladiators who fought that day. It was the crowd, too, their collective energy feeding into the spectacle, the roar of their voices filling the air and reverberating through the centuries to come. As the dust settles on the arena floor, the Colosseum reveals itself as a world of its own, an intricate web of life that stretches beyond the fierce spectacles that take place in the centre. Beneath the grand arches and towering columns, there is a quieter, almost unnoticed rhythm that pulses through the arena. This is where the true complexity of the Colosseum lies, hidden in the mundane moments, the everyday tasks that keep this massive structure alive. As the crowd continues to cheer high above the arena, in the rafters and corridors, attendants bustle about, moving with practiced ease. Some fetch water, their footsteps echoing faintly against the stone. Others prepare the next part of the show, their hands steady and sure as they tend to the gladiators' armor, adjusting the straps with quiet precision. Even the air, thick with anticipation, carries a faint scent of leather and oil, mingling with the dust of the floor below. In the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the spectators, small groups of workers gather, their hands moving in synchronized movements. They carefully prepare the next set for the performance, an elaborate scene, perhaps, or a reenactment of some great battle, each piece falling into place like clockwork. The clink of metal, the quiet shuffle of feet, all contribute to the subtle orchestration of the day's events. And then, of course, there are the animals. They wait in their pens, just behind the scenes, barely making a sound but ready to perform at a moment's notice. Their handlers move among them with the same calm efficiency, checking on their well-being, making sure they are ready for the next part of the show. Their presence is almost invisible to the crowd, but in this hidden world, they are as much a part of the spectacle as the gladiators themselves. It's curious, isn't it? Amidst the grandeur, there's a certain irony to the workings of the Colosseum. While the crowd watches the violent clash of men and beasts, few consider the countless quieter lives that are moving just out of sight, those who work in the shadows, keeping everything running smoothly. Without them, the show would fall apart, and yet their existence is almost entirely overlooked. And, even in the midst of all this activity, there's a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm to it all. The way the attendants move, the sound of metal against leather, the brief pause as the gladiators prepare for their next fight. All of it happens with a steady, unwavering cadence. There is no rush, no urgency, just the ongoing flow of life inside the Colosseum, like the ebb and flow of a tide. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long shadows across the arena, the scene inside the Colosseum transforms once again. The crowds settle into their seats, their voices dimming slightly as the next act prepares to begin. The workers finish their tasks, their movements slowing as the arena readies itself for the final moments of the day. And once again, the rhythm of the Colosseum continues, an unbroken thread weaving through the hustle and bustle of life inside. Now, let us turn our attention to those who stood at the very heart of the Colosseum, the gladiators. These men who walked into the arena with all eyes upon them had a life that few could truly understand. Their days were not filled with glory or celebration, but with a constant struggle, a struggle for survival, for honor, for a future that was never certain. In the morning light, the gladiators train. Their bodies move with purpose, each swing of the sword, each block of the shield methodical and measured. There's no fanfare, no crowd cheering them on, only the sound of metal against metal, the rhythm of each motion as they prepare for what lies ahead. The air is heavy with the smell of sweat, the leather of their armor creaking as they shift and move. It's an everyday routine, one that builds strength but also a quiet resignation. For these men, training is not a choice, it is a necessity. And yet, in this daily grind, there is an almost calming sense of repetition. The scrape of feet across sand, the steady clang of practice swords, and the rhythmic rise and fall of breath. It all becomes a part of the routine, as familiar as the beating of the heart. It is a rhythm that, once ingrained, becomes the very pulse of life. Every movement, every practice session is a step toward the inevitable. In the barracks where the gladiators sleep, life is simple, almost sparse. The space is cramped, the air thick with the smell of bodies and the faint scent of leather. They lie side by side, resting between bouts, exchanging stories of past fights, their voices low, as if speaking any louder might somehow break the fragile peace of the moment. There's no luxury here, no comforts, just the simple desire to survive, to live another day. And yet, there is a certain camaraderie among them, an unspoken bond formed through shared experiences. They may not choose to fight, but they choose to stand beside one another. There is a brotherhood in the arena, born of mutual respect for the struggle they face together. And in the silence of the barracks, as they prepare for the next day's challenge, that bond grows stronger. But not all is as it seems. For many gladiators, life inside the arena was more than just physical combat. It was psychological warfare, fighting not just with swords, but with the mind. They lived under constant pressure, the threat of death always lingering in the air, ready to strike at any moment. The crowds expected victory, but the gladiators knew that survival was never guaranteed. One wrong move, one slip of the foot, and it could all be over. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The very men who were brought to the arena to entertain, to fight for the glory of Rome, often found themselves merely fighting to live another day. And yet, even in this harsh existence, there were moments of peace. In the quiet corners of the barracks, or in the fleeting seconds between battles, the gladiators could forget, if only for a moment, the brutal reality of their lives. As the sun sets and the Colosseum prepares for another round of fights, the gladiators step onto the sand once more. Their hearts beat steady in their chests, their eyes focused on the task at hand. There is no turning back now. The roar of the crowd awaits. And so, with each breath, each step, they face the arena, not just as fighters, but as men who, against all odds, continue to survive. As the cheers of the crowd begin to fade into the distance, we step away from the chaos of the arena and find ourselves in the quieter, often overlooked corners of the Colosseum. Here, behind the towering walls and beneath the grandeur of the spectators' seats, life moves at its own, slower pace. It's a place where the rush of the games gives way to the hum of everyday existence, unnoticed by most, yet essential to the functioning of this grand arena. In the shadow of the great amphitheatre, narrow corridors wind between stone walls, their surfaces weathered and worn. The air here is cooler, filled with the scent of earth and stone. Workers move quietly along these paths, their sandals making soft rhythmic sounds as they go about their tasks. There's no need for speed here, no frantic rush. Every step is measured, purposeful. Each movement, though mundane, contributes to the steady flow of life inside the Colosseum. In one corner, away from the crowd's roar, a simple wooden table is set up. It's here that some of the gladiators come to sharpen their weapons, their swords glinting softly in the dim light. The metal scrapes gently against the whetstone, a sound that somehow matches the peacefulness of this corner, far removed from the bloodshed and drama unfolding above. The sharpening isn't done in haste, it's a ritual, a slow, methodical process that brings focus, a moment of calm before the storm. And then, in another quiet nook, there's a small gathering of attendants. Their work is often unseen, but no less important. They go about their duties with careful precision, arranging armor, ensuring that everything is in place for the next fight. Their hands are steady, their eyes focused. In their movements, there's a quiet dignity. There's no applause, no recognition, just the hum of work being done with quiet grace. It's almost as if the bustle of the arena doesn't touch them here. The contrast is striking, isn't it? The loud cheers and blood-pumping action of the gladiators above, and yet, below, there's a sense of tranquility that often goes unnoticed. The workers and attendants in these quiet corners, with their simple tasks, are the uncelebrated backbone of the Colosseum. They never hear the roar of the crowd, never feel the rush of adrenaline. Instead, they find their rhythm in the small, steady motions of daily life. And somewhere, hidden from sight, there are those who sweep the floors, clean the benches, and gather the discarded bits of armor and weapons after the battles. Their hands move with steady purpose, collecting the remnants of what has passed, making sure that everything is ready for what comes next. The details are small, almost insignificant, but their work ensures that the Colosseum remains a place of spectacle, day after day. In the quiet corners of the Colosseum, there's no glory, no fame, only the simple, repetitive tasks that keep the machine running. And in that, there's something peaceful, something almost meditative. For it's in these small, unnoticed moments that the true pulse of life inside the Colosseum lies. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the Colosseum, the crowd's cheer gradually fades into silence, and in this quiet, something small, almost unnoticed, begins to stir beneath the grand arena. It's a subtle movement at first, the faintest scurry of tiny feet across the cold stone floor. The rats have arrived. They come, not with the grand entrance of the gladiators, but in their own quiet, unassuming way. Just a flicker of motion in the corners of the Colosseum, barely visible to the human eye. At first, they are nothing more than shadows, their tiny paws moving softly across the earth, barely disturbing the dust. But as the days pass and the arena empties, these small creatures begin to carve out their space in the vast expanse of the Colosseum. It's almost as if the Colosseum, in all its grandeur, has become their home. The rats, with their tiny bodies and twitching noses, find their way into the cracks and crevices of the ancient stone. They slip through the narrow gaps in the walls, moving in the darkness where light rarely touches. The Colosseum, so full of life and noise during the day, transforms at night into something quieter, something smaller, where these creatures thrive. The rats aren't here for glory. They don't seek fame or recognition. No, their life is much simpler, much more basic. They're here to survive, to find food, and to escape the harshness of the world above. They scurry across the stone floor, weaving between pillars and slipping through the spaces left between the arena's seating. Their movements are quick and efficient, unnoticed by the masses who come to watch the grand performances. They are the silent witnesses to the grand spectacle that takes place above them. It's almost ironic, isn't it? Here, in this great arena of life and death, where men fight for their very survival, it's the smallest creatures, the ones you wouldn't expect, that find a way to endure. While the gladiators risk their lives in the sand, the rats move quietly and without fear, making their way across the very same space. In the early days, no one paid them much attention. They were just another part of the Colosseum's ecosystem, insignificant, unnoticed. The crowds, lost in their excitement and adrenaline, had little thought for these small creatures. Yet, as the battles raged on and the grand events took place, the rats continued their quiet existence, slipping through the cracks, scavenging for food and building their homes in the forgotten corners of the arena. It's a strange thought, really. The Colosseum, a place meant for grand battles, for blood and glory, has become a sanctuary for creatures that seek nothing more than survival. And in that, perhaps there's a lesson in resilience. These small creatures, though often overlooked, possess a tenacity that has allowed them to endure, even in the shadow of the greatest empire the world has ever known. As the days turn into weeks, the rats, ever vigilant, begin to adapt to the rhythm of the Colosseum. They've learned to move with the ebb and flow of life inside this grand structure, knowing that survival is an art, a delicate balance between being seen and remaining unseen. Their resilience, though quiet, is unmatched. Each small creature becomes a master of survival, a testament to the tenacity that exists in the most unexpected places. It's fascinating, really, how something so small can endure in such a vast and harsh environment. The Colosseum, with its towering walls and massive arena, is a place of extremes. Heat in the day, chill at night, the sound of battle and the silence between fights, all of it creates an ever-shifting world. But the rats, in their own subtle way, thrive. They've learned the art of evasion, slipping into shadows when the crowds return, disappearing into the cracks when the danger of discovery looms. Their movements are fluid, practiced, as if they've done this 1,000 times before. Scurrying along the ancient stone, they find the smallest crumbs left behind by the spectators, the tiniest morsels of food discarded in the frenzy of the day's events. A piece of bread, a fragment of meat, small offerings, but enough to sustain them. They don't need much, just enough to get by, just enough to continue their quiet existence. And when the crowds leave, the Colosseum becomes a different world. The seats, once filled with eager faces, are now empty, leaving behind a vast, silent space. The rats, no longer in hiding, venture freely across the arena floor, exploring the edges of the stadium, where the light barely reaches. It's in these quiet, forgotten corners that they truly flourish. The arena, once a place of life and death, becomes a haven for them, a sanctuary of stone and dust where they can gather and rest. It's almost a kind of irony, isn't it? The mighty gladiators, who risked everything in the arena, fought and bled for glory, and yet it's the tiny, unnoticed rats that have mastered the art of survival. While the gladiators fought for fame and fortune, the rats simply fought for another day. No cheers, no fame, just the unyielding drive to keep moving forward. There's something almost peaceful in their resilience, the way they've adapted to their surroundings. They don't rush, don't panic, they wait for the right moment, slip into the shadows and take what's needed. Every day they learn something new, refine their strategy, and survive. They don't need grand strategies or plans, just patience and persistence. And as the seasons change, as the dust settles in the Colosseum and the battles come to an end, the rats remain. They've learned to thrive in the cracks, in the unseen spaces that most would overlook. Through every challenge, every shift in the world above, they have found a way to endure. And in their quiet survival, there's a story of resilience that speaks volumes about the will to live, even in the harshest of places. As the first light of morning spills over the Colosseum, the air remains cool and the sound of life slowly begins to rise from the streets of Rome. But down here, in the quiet corners of the arena, another world stirs. The rats are awake, and their day is about to begin. The air is still filled with the faintest smell of damp stone and the distant hum of the waking city. The rats, small and swift, twitch their noses, sensing the faintest shift in the atmosphere. With the crowds yet to arrive, it's the perfect time to move. In the shadows, where the sunlight barely reaches, they begin their daily search for food. Every morning is a careful dance. They emerge from the cracks and crevices of the Colosseum's foundation, slipping quietly between columns and walls, their movements barely noticeable. They know the layout of the arena by heart, every nook and cranny, every hidden corner where scraps of food might be left behind. They weave through the rows of empty seats, their tiny paws skittering across the stone, moving with precision. There's a rhythm to their actions, calm and unhurried. Their little eyes scan the floor, looking for the faintest traces of leftover food. A crumpled piece of bread here, a bit of dried meat there. Small, often overlooked treasures. They don't rush. They take their time, carefully inspecting each morsel before moving on. They've learned that patience is key, for in the Colosseum, every day is a new opportunity to find just enough to survive. And as the crowds begin to gather, the rats know it's time to retreat. The arena, once empty and silent, fills with the sounds of excited voices, the shuffle of sandals across the stone. The rats, ever cautious, slip back into the shadows, hiding in the unseen spaces beneath the grandstands. They know that the human world is not for them, not yet. So they wait in stillness, blending with the silence, allowing the bustling noise above to pass them by. The day unfolds in this way. When the fights begin and the crowds cheer, the rats are nowhere to be seen. They are hidden in their quiet refuges, waiting for the right moment. And when the battles subside and the crowds begin to leave, the Colosseum once again becomes their playground. It is then, in the quiet aftermath, that the rats emerge once more. The seats are littered with small bits of food left behind by the spectators. Crumbs, discarded fruit skins, and the occasional forgotten piece of bread. The rats know that now is their time. They scurry about, moving quickly but carefully, gathering the leftovers before anyone can notice. Their work is methodical, almost meditative. Every piece of food collected is a victory, a small triumph in the ongoing struggle for survival. As the sun sets and the last of the crowd trickles out, the Colosseum falls into silence. The rats, full from their scavenging, retreat into their hidden homes. They curl up in the dark, secure in their tiny forgotten corners, and as the night settles they rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day, another opportunity to survive in the shadows of Rome's grandest arena. As the grand crowds depart and the Colosseum grows quiet once again, the arena, so full of life and excitement only hours ago, begins to reveal its quieter, more hidden side. The noise, the cheers, and the battles fade into a soft murmur, leaving behind only the stillness and the ancient stone that has witnessed it all. In these quiet moments, we turn our attention to the forgotten corners of the Colosseum, the spaces where light barely touches and where the rats find their refuge. These corners, tucked away beneath the towering arches and beneath the seats of the arena, are places where the grand spectacle of the Colosseum never reaches. Dark, cool, and silent, they are hidden from the eyes of the audience and the roar of the crowds. Here, the air is thick with the scent of old stone and the faintest trace of dampness that lingers in the shadows. It's a world removed from the chaos and glory that unfolds above. In one such corner, tucked beneath a crumbling pillar, a small opening leads to a dark passageway, the kind of place that most people never notice. To the casual observer, it's just another forgotten part of the arena, but to the rats, it is a sanctuary. They slip through the narrow gaps in the stone, their tiny bodies moving with ease through the dim passageways, following a path that only they know. Their eyes, sharp and alert, scan the walls for any hint of food, any discarded crumbs left behind by the bustling crowds. These forgotten corners are where the rats make their homes, small hidden nests made of straw, discarded cloth, and bits of ancient armor. They create these nests in places no one would think to look. Behind the columns, beneath the seats, in the spaces where the stone meets the earth. The rats have learned to make the most of these quiet, concealed spots. They have no need for grandeur, no need for attention. They simply need a safe place to rest, to survive. And yet, there is something almost serene about these corners. The stillness, the lack of activity, gives them a sense of peace, a respite from the noise and commotion of the arena. Here, in these dark spaces, time seems to slow down. The rats nestle into their homes, the sound of their breathing steady and calm. Outside, the wind picks up, and the Colosseum stands tall and silent. But here, in the shadows, the rhythm of life moves at its own pace. It's a curious thing, isn't it? The Colosseum, a place meant for spectacle, for glory and for blood, also holds these quiet, hidden worlds that are as far removed from the centre of attention as possible. The rats, in their quiet lives, are the true residents of these forgotten corners. While the gladiators fight for fame, they fight simply for survival, carving out their existence in places where no one else dares to go. And in these corners the cycle continues, day after day, night after night. The rats, ever resourceful, return to these quiet spaces, their tiny paws padding across the cold stone. They find food where it's left behind, curl up in their humble nests and rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring another opportunity to thrive in the shadows of the Colosseum. As the days pass in the Colosseum, the sounds of battle slowly fade into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence that fills the arena. The dust settles on the sand where once mighty gladiators stood, weapons drawn, eyes fierce with determination. But for many this fight was the last they would ever face. Their fate sealed not by their skill, but by the harsh reality of the arena. It's strange to think, isn't it? These men trained in the art of combat, their bodies honed through years of rigorous preparation, often fought not for victory, but for survival. Each fight was a gamble, a chance to win, yes, but also a chance to lose everything. For the gladiators, the arena was not a place of honour, but of fear, a place where the roar of the crowd might echo with cheers one moment and the silence of death the next. Some would fall in battle, their bodies crumpling to the sand, their blood mixing with the earth beneath. Others would find themselves victorious, only to face yet another day of brutal combat. The cycle was unyielding, unrelenting, and for many it was a fate they couldn't escape. The days blurred into one another, training, fighting, resting. There was no respite, no comfort, only the constant pressure to perform, to survive. But even in the midst of this harsh existence, there were moments of calm, moments when the gladiators would rest. After a fight, when the crowds had gone home, the air would grow quiet once more, and the gladiators would retreat to their barracks. Here, in the solitude of their small rooms, they would find brief solace. The sweat and grime of battle washed away, they would lie on simple straw mattresses, their bodies bruised, their minds weary. In these moments, the silence of the barracks was almost peaceful, almost comforting. A small respite before the next round of fighting, and yet the fate of the gladiators was never certain. Even those who survived the longest could not escape the reality of their existence. Time, as it passed, took its toll on them. The young men who had once entered the arena with hope in their hearts and fire in their eyes often grew weary, their spirits slowly eroded by the endless cycle of violence. Some would fall ill, their bodies weakened by the years of strain. Others would simply fade into obscurity, their names lost to the sands of time. It's an irony, really, isn't it? These men, who fought with such courage, often never found the glory they were promised. Some died young, their lives snuffed out in the heat of the battle, their names never to be remembered. Others lived, but their spirits were broken, their bodies scarred, until they were nothing more than shadows of the men they had once been. But for all the blood spilled in the Colosseum, for all the lives lost and taken, there was one thing that the gladiators could not escape: the passage of time. The arena, once a place of endless battles and endless victories, began to fade into history, just as the gladiators themselves did. The crowds moved on, the emperors changed, and the grand spectacle of the Colosseum slowed to a quiet hum. And so, as we reflect on the fate of these men, the ones who fought in the shadow of the empire, we see a story not just of battle and blood, but of endurance. For while many may have fallen, the spirit of the gladiators lived on in the quiet corners of history, in the echoes of the arena that still linger today. As we reflect on the lives of the gladiators, their struggles, their victories, and their eventual fate, there's an undeniable irony that stands out. While these mighty warriors trained in combat and battle fought with all their strength and skill, it was the small, unassuming creatures, the rats, that outlasted them. It's almost as if the very essence of survival wasn't about strength or glory, but about quiet persistence. The gladiators fought with all they had, pushing their bodies to the limit, hoping for freedom, hoping for recognition, or simply hoping to live another day. But in the end, it was the rats who thrived. While the gladiators risked everything in the arena, the rats, with their tiny paws and sharp instincts, remained unnoticed, quietly carving out a life in the shadows. It's almost poetic, in a way. The gladiators, strong and fierce, fought for a fleeting moment of glory, but their battles left them vulnerable. Every fight took a toll on their bodies and their spirits. The arena, once a place of grand spectacle, slowly wore them down. And in the end, it wasn't the strength of the gladiators that determined their survival. It was their ability to endure the harshness of their world. Meanwhile, the rats, with their small, agile bodies, never sought glory. They didn't fight for honor. They didn't even need the roar of the crowd. Their survival was based on something much simpler: adaptation. Every day they quietly navigated the Colosseum, searching for food, avoiding danger, and finding shelter in the dark corners of the arena. They knew the rhythm of the place, when the crowds would arrive, when the fights would take place, and when it was safe to come out. In their quiet ways, they learned the art of survival, one small step at a time. The rats didn't have the grand armor or the weapons of the gladiators. They didn't have the fame, the crowds, or the glory. What they had was patience, persistence, and an uncanny ability to adapt. They didn't rely on strength or skill in combat. They relied on their ability to navigate the world, to remain unseen, and to find sustenance where others could not. And as the Colosseum grew older, as the empire slowly crumbled, it was these small creatures that remained. While the gladiators fell, some to death in the arena, others to the slow erosion of time, the rats quietly outlived them all. Their numbers grew, their world expanded within the great stone walls of the Colosseum, and they continued, unnoticed, to thrive in the very place where men once battled for glory. It's a simple truth, really. The strongest don't always survive, and the ones who seem insignificant may hold the key to enduring the longest. The rats, without fanfare or recognition, had mastered the art of survival. Their world was one of quiet persistence, finding food where others saw none, retreating into the shadows when danger approached, and always moving forward, step by small step. And so, while the gladiators' names may be forgotten by history, the rats, in their own quiet way, became the true survivors of the Colosseum, not because they were the fiercest, but because they knew how to live with the rhythm of the world around them, adapting to whatever came their way. In the end, it was their resilience, their simple drive to survive, that ensured they would outlast it all. As the Colosseum stands silent, its massive walls holding the echoes of battles fought and lives lost, the world outside carries on with its own rhythm. Here, beyond the arena's towering stone walls, life in Rome moves at a slower pace, with a quiet simplicity that often goes unnoticed amid the grandeur of the empire. In the bustling streets of Rome, the air is thick with the sounds of daily life. The clatter of wooden carts' wheels against cobblestones fills the air as merchants call out to passers-by, selling their wares. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafts from the bakeries, mixing with the faint scent of herbs and olive oil carried by the breeze. People of all walks of life move through the city. Shopkeepers, artisans, children laughing and chasing each other through narrow alleys. There's a rhythm to it, a steady, almost hypnotic pulse that ties the city together. The sun casts a golden glow over the rooftops as women sweep the dust from their doorsteps, their brooms brushing softly against the ground. Children run through the streets, their sandals tapping lightly against the stone. Every movement seems measured, deliberate. Even in the busyness of the day, there's a quiet elegance to the everyday motions of the people. It's as if each moment is a small dance, a ritual of life that is repeated day in and day out. And in the markets, the heart of Rome's commerce, life continues in its own quiet way. Traders barter, their voices low and calm, negotiating the prices of grain, wine, and pottery. The simple exchange of goods is almost meditative, a quiet routine that mirrors the steadiness of the Roman Empire itself. The clink of coins, the soft rustle of fabric, these sounds are the backdrop to the ongoing story of Rome, one that unfolds far from the glare of the Colosseum's lights. Even the humble act of preparing a meal carries a sense of ritual. In the kitchens of Roman homes, the aroma of stews and roasted meats fills the air. The cook stirs a pot slowly, each motion deliberate, as the sounds of chopping vegetables echo softly. The family gathers around the table, their voices gentle as they speak of the day's events, news from the marketplace, the state of the harvest, and perhaps the latest gossip from the Colosseum. Life, it seems, goes on in its simple, unassuming way, far removed from the grand spectacles of the arena. But there is something undeniably comforting about this life outside the Colosseum. The world here is not marked by blood and glory, but by the small, steady acts of everyday existence. The people of Rome live in the shadows of the empire's great triumphs, but their lives are no less meaningful. It's a world that moves at a different pace, one that isn't filled with the roar of the crowd or the clash of swords, but with the steady hum of life going on as it always has. It's almost ironic, isn't it? While the gladiators fight for their survival in the great arena, the people outside the Colosseum, those who never taste the glory or the danger of the arena, continue their own battles. They too face struggles, but they do so in quieter, less dramatic ways. And in that, perhaps, there is a greater sense of peace, a life that, though less visible, is no less important. As the day winds down and the sun sets over the city, the streets of Rome begin to quiet. The merchants pack up their goods, the children head home, and the city takes on a softer, more peaceful tone. It's in these moments, in the quiet of the evening, that life outside the Colosseum feels most complete. The world continues unbroken as it always has, and the people of Rome find solace in the simple rhythms of their existence. As the day deepens, the Colosseum, though still, begins to stir with life once again. The vast arena, silent and empty for much of the day, now feels the gentle hum of anticipation as the crowd gathers. There's a subtle shift in the air, a vibration that seems to pass through the stone walls as the people settle into their seats. The faint murmurs of the audience, the rustling of robes and tunics fills the space. But there is a quiet hum beneath it all, a growing tension, one that signals the beginning of something much more intense. And then the first sound rings out. A single trumpet blares, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a sudden gust of wind. The noise echoes off the stone walls, reverberating through the massive structure. For a moment, it feels as though the entire Colosseum trembles. The crowd's voices rise in response, eager, expectant, as the gates open and the gladiators emerge onto the arena floor. The sound is almost surreal, isn't it? A single trumpet, so sharp and clear, piercing the stillness before it is swallowed by the growing noise of the crowd. And then, almost as if on cue, the arena fills with the rhythmic thuds of heavy boots against stone, the soft scrape of shields being raised, and the faint, sharp clash of metal on metal as the gladiators begin to take their positions. It's a sound that's at once both commanding and unsettling. You can almost feel the energy vibrating through the air as the gladiators stand ready, their eyes locked on one another, waiting for the first strike. The sound of battle is a strange thing. At first, it's soft, almost muted, the scrape of a sword on armor, the dull thud of a shield being struck. But then, as the fight progresses, it begins to swell like a crescendo building in a symphony. The clash of steel against steel, the grunts of exertion, the quickening pace of footfalls, each sound amplifying the tension. It grows, louder and louder, until the arena is filled with the unmistakable roar of combat. But even in the midst of all this noise, there's something oddly hypnotic about it. The rhythm of battle, the clash and clang of weapons, almost becomes a dance of survival, a choreographed sequence of strikes and blocks, parries and thrusts. It's a slow build, each movement deliberate, each sound adding to the growing intensity. The steady rhythm of the gladiators' breath, the calculated movements of their arms, all punctuated by the sharp, echoing ring of steel on steel. The crowd reacts, of course, their voices rising in excitement with each passing moment, cheers, gasps, shouts. But in the background there is the constant sound of the battle itself, the noise of a fight that's been repeated thousands of times in the Colosseum. It's not just the sound of a gladiator's sword striking its target, it's the sound of a system, of a cycle that's been running for centuries. A rhythm that never really stops, even when the arena empties and the night falls over Rome. It's strange, isn't it? How something so violent, so raw, can take on such a rhythm, such a cadence. The sound of battle, like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. It's a sound that echoes through history, through the centuries, a sound that is part of the very fabric of the Colosseum itself. And in those moments, as the gladiators fight for their lives, you can almost feel the weight of it, the weight of a world that thrives on these sounds, on this violence, and on the survival that comes with it. And as the final blows are struck, the noise gradually fades. The swords are sheathed, the shields lowered, and the crowd's cheers begin to quiet. The sounds of battle linger for a moment, hanging in the air like the last notes of a song, before being swallowed up by the silence that follows. The Colosseum, once again, stands still. But for those who were there, who heard the sounds of battle, the echo remains, a quiet reminder of the fierce rhythm that once filled these stone walls. As the battle above rages on, the Colosseum, so grand and filled with spectacle, hides a world far removed from the roar of the crowd. Beneath the massive stone floors, hidden from the eyes of the spectators, lies a network of tunnels, passages and chambers, an underground world where only the quietest of creatures dare to dwell. This is where the secrets of the Colosseum are kept, in the darkness, far from the light of the arena. The air down here is cool, damp, and thick with the scent of earth and stone. The passageways, narrow and winding, seem to go on forever, disappearing into the shadows. The walls are uneven, worn smooth by centuries of use, but they hold a sense of stability, of time past and stories untold. The faintest sound echoes in the silence. Footsteps, soft and muted, the rustle of fabric, the shuffle of paws across cold stone. It's a world of quiet, of waiting, of survival. In these hidden depths, the rats have found their sanctuary. No longer the unnoticed creatures darting across the arena floor. They are the true residents of this underground labyrinth. Their lives unfold in the shadows, where the light barely reaches. Here, in the cool, dark passageways, the rats have carved out their homes, small, hidden spaces where they can rest and find shelter from the chaos above. Some nest in the crevices between walls, while others burrow into the damp earth beneath the arena. There's a strange tranquility down here, isn't there? Away from the noise, the blood and the drama of the arena, the rats live their lives in a world of their own. They are unhurried, moving slowly through the shadows, their tiny paws padding softly against the stone floor. They are the silent witnesses to the spectacle above, but their lives are anything but dramatic. They find food in the smallest places, hidden beneath discarded cloths, in forgotten corners where the light of day never reaches. In the deep recesses of the Colosseum, the sound is muffled, the vibrations of the battles above barely reaching these dark chambers. The faintest echo of the crowd's cheers might drift down through the cracks, but it's distant, a mere whisper compared to the noise above. The rats, though, are undisturbed. They know these tunnels well, weaving in and out of the maze with a familiarity that speaks to the many generations that have passed through these same spaces. And what's striking is how unaffected they are by the spectacle above. While gladiators fight for their lives, battling with the roar of the crowd in their ears, the rats simply go about their business. They slip into the darkness, avoiding the chaos, finding their way into places that no human eye will ever see. It's almost as if they are part of a secret world, a world that thrives in the hidden corners of the Colosseum, unnoticed by those who live their lives in the light. It's in these tunnels, these forgotten spaces beneath the Colosseum, that the true essence of survival can be found. The rats, with their quiet movements, have mastered the art of living unnoticed. They don't seek fame, don't fight for glory. They simply survive, and they do so in the shadows, in a world that most never think to look at, but that holds the key to understanding life in the Colosseum. As the day wears on and the last echoes of the crowd's cheer fade, the rats retreat further into the depths, finding their places in the darkness. The Colosseum above returns to its silence, the last of the spectators trickling out, leaving behind only the stone and the memories of the day. And beneath it all, in the unseen corners, the rats continue their quiet existence, tucked away in the secrets of the Colosseum's underworld. As the years slip quietly by, the Colosseum begins to change. It's subtle at first, a shift in the air, a faint crack in the stone, the soft rustle of history moving forward. What once echoed with the thunderous noise of gladiators fighting for glory now begins to feel the weight of time, the slow but steady passage of days, seasons, and centuries. The stone, once so pristine, begins to show the signs of wear. Cracks appear along the walls, like the wrinkles on the face of an old warrior who has seen too many battles. The crowds that once filled the arena with their cheers and gasps begin to dwindle as the days of grand spectacles fade into memory. The sun rises and sets, casting long shadows across the empty seats, while the silent columns stand tall, quietly witnessing the changing world around them. The Colosseum, once alive with the sounds of combat and celebration, begins to grow quieter. The echoes of battle fade, and in their place comes the soft murmur of time itself. The gladiators, once the stars of the arena, are now a distant memory, their names whispered in the annals of history. The mighty emperors who once ruled Rome with iron fists now fade into the pages of old scrolls, their power crumbling as the empire they built begins to unravel. And yet, life goes on, doesn't it? The rhythms of the city outside continue, steady and uninterrupted. The markets still bustle with the chatter of merchants, the clatter of carts against cobblestones. Children still play in the streets, their laughter rising into the sky. It's as if the Colosseum itself is a quiet witness to this steady flow of life that doesn't demand attention, but simply continues, day after day. But even in this quiet, there's an undeniable sense of change. The Colosseum, once the heart of the empire, now finds itself caught between the past and the present. The grand arena, with its marble columns and majestic arches, stands as a silent reminder of what once was. Yet, it is no longer the centre of Rome's world. The empire that built it is crumbling, and with it, the grand spectacles that once defined its strength. It's almost ironic, isn't it? How something so grand, so powerful, can eventually fade into the quiet shadows of time. The Colosseum, which once thundered with the cries of warriors and the cheers of the crowd, now stands almost still as the world around it changes. The iron gates that once held back the fiercest fighters now creak in the wind, their rusted hinges a sign of the passage of time. And yet, there is a certain peace in this change. The Colosseum may no longer echo with the roar of battle, but it still stands, silent, steadfast, a monument to a different time. The world around it may shift, but the stone remains, bearing witness to the changing tides of history. The gladiators may be gone, but the memories linger, like the faintest whispers carried on the wind. In the end, the Colosseum is not just a place of death and glory. It is a place that has lived through the rise and fall of an empire. It is a place that has withstood the ravages of time, a place where the very air seems to hold the weight of history. And as the world outside continues to change, the Colosseum remains, a quiet reminder of what once was and what can never truly be forgotten. As the last echoes of the crowd's cheer fade into the night, the Colosseum stands in stillness, a quiet giant in the heart of Rome. The sounds of battle are long gone, replaced by the soft rustling of the wind as it moves through the empty seats and weathered stone. The arena, once full of life and energy, now lies in silence, bathed in the soft light of the moon, and it is in this quiet, after the excitement has subsided, that the true rhythm of the Colosseum begins to unfold. The lights of the arena are dimmed and the crowds trickle out, their voices growing fainter with each step they take. The stone, cool from the evening air, seems to settle into a peaceful silence. But beneath the surface, something else stirs. The rats, ever vigilant, begin to emerge from their hidden corners, slipping silently through the shadows. The night, for the rats, is a time of freedom. With the hustle and bustle of the day over, they venture out into the vast emptiness of the Colosseum. The arena, once filled with the noise of gladiators and the roar of the crowd, now feels like a different world, a quiet place, almost dreamlike, where only the faintest sounds of movement break the stillness. The rats, with their sharp senses, move quietly, their tiny feet padding softly across the stone, searching for their nightly meal. They know the Colosseum well, every crack in the stone, every crevice in the wall, every hidden space that holds the promise of a meal. They slip between the seats, their bodies weaving through the gaps, unnoticed by the few who remain in the shadows. The arena floor, once the site of violent clashes, now holds only the remnants of the day's events, crumbs of bread, fragments of meat, and the occasional piece of fruit that was carelessly dropped in the excitement of the crowd. To the rats, these are treasures, little victories in their quiet existence. The sounds of the night are subtle, almost peaceful. The rustling of rats as they scurry about, the soft scraping of their claws against the stone, the occasional squeak as one of them finds a particularly delectable morsel. They work in silence, moving from one corner to the next, always vigilant, always aware of the world around them. The Colosseum, in its quiet state, is their kingdom, a vast, empty realm where they reign supreme. It's almost as if the Colosseum has transformed into something entirely different at night. Gone is the grandeur, the spectacle, the clamour of human lives. In its place is a world of shadows, where the smallest creatures move freely. The moonlight falls softly on the ancient stone, casting long, eerie shadows across the arena floor. The air is cool, and the faint scent of dust and old wood fills the space. The rats, in their tiny world, continue their endless search for food, their movements rhythmic, almost meditative, and as the night deepens, the Colosseum seems to fall further into its slumber. The sounds of the rats become softer, the arena grows stiller. The last scraps are gathered, the final shadows are passed through, and the rats retreat back to their hidden nests, to the quiet corners and forgotten spaces where they rest until the dawn calls them out once more. The Colosseum, though silent, still carries the weight of its past. But for the rats, it is simply a place to survive, a place where the night belongs to them. And in this stillness, as the moon rises higher and the last footsteps fade away, the Colosseum sleeps, waiting for another day to come, another day of stories, battles, and whispers in the shadows. As the years pass, the Colosseum begins to feel the weight of time more deeply. The once constant roar of the crowd fades, the cheers growing quieter with each passing year. The gladiators, who had once fought with such fervour, with hearts filled with hope or desperation, gradually become fewer in number. The arena, once teeming with warriors and their battles for survival, starts to fall silent. It's strange, isn't it, how something that seemed so constant, so eternal, can slowly come to an end. The gladiator games, which had been a staple of Roman life for centuries, begin to lose their significance. The empire, once built on the power of the sword, begins to shift, its priorities changing as new leaders and ideologies take hold. The gladiators, Those fierce and feared fighters are no longer seen as the heroes they once were. The decline begins quietly. The battles, once a grand spectacle for the people, begin to feel out of place in a changing world. The crowds, once eager to witness the bloodshed and the triumphs, grow smaller. The emperors who had once used the games to gain favor with the people begin to see the futility of it all. The bloodshed, the violence, the endless cycle of life and death no longer seems to serve the empire in the way it once did. And so, slowly, the gladiatorial games come to an end. The grand arena, once the heart of Rome's entertainment, begins to quiet. The gladiators, once so full of purpose, now stand at the edges of history, their names fading into the shadows. The sound of their swords clashing, the roar of the crowd becomes nothing more than a distant memory. It's almost ironic, isn't it? How something born out of the empire's need for power and control could eventually be seen as outdated, a relic of a past era. The gladiators, who had fought for honor, for fame, or simply for survival, now find themselves part of history. Their fights, their struggles are remembered but no longer celebrated. In a way, the end of the gladiators marks the end of an era. The Colosseum, which had once been a place of life and death, now becomes a monument to a past that no longer exists. The crowds, once so eager for blood, now look elsewhere for their entertainment. The gladiators, who had once captivated the empire, are left behind, their legacy reduced to whispers in the halls of time. But even as the gladiatorial games come to a close, the Colosseum remains. The stone, though worn and weathered, still stands tall, a silent witness to the rise and fall of the empire. The sand, once stained with blood, is now empty, its stories untold. The arena, which had once been a stage for the greatest battles, now holds only memories, its grandeur fading with the passing years. And so, the end of the gladiators is marked not with a final dramatic clash, but with a quiet fade into history. Their battles, their struggles have been fought and won, some for glory, some for survival, but all now lost to time. The Colosseum, standing as it always has, will continue to whisper their stories long after the final battle has been fought. As the Colosseum stands quietly in the heart of Rome, its grand arches and towering walls are no longer filled with the sounds of battle, but even in its stillness there's a legacy that lingers in the very stones of the arena. The Colosseum, built for spectacle, for blood and glory, has left behind a story that echoes through time long after the final gladiator has left the sand. It's a curious thing, really. The Colosseum, which once saw the might of the Roman Empire on full display, has become a symbol of something much greater than the events that once took place within its walls. The battles, the bloodshed, the violence, all of these were part of its history, but they were not what the Colosseum was meant to be remembered for. No, its legacy is not in the past it hosted, but in the future it inspired. The arena, with its grandeur and its history, has become more than just a physical structure. It is a monument to the empire's power, yes, but also to the resilience of time. Through centuries of change, from the fall of the empire to the present day, the Colosseum has remained a testament to the endurance of human endeavor. The stone that once held the weight of warriors now stands as a quiet witness to the passing of time. What's fascinating is how the Colosseum continues to resonate, even in the modern world. In its shadow, the city of Rome has evolved, but the legacy of the Colosseum is still felt. Tourists from all over the world come to see it, to stand in the very place where history was made. And in doing so, they don't just look back. They connect with something timeless. The Colosseum, in its quiet grandeur, speaks to something deeper than just the stories of the past. The irony of it all is not lost, is it? The very place that was once a symbol of violence and power now stands as a symbol of endurance, of history's ability to outlast the events that shaped it. The gladiators, the emperors, the crowds, they are all gone. But the Colosseum remains, its legacy enduring, its story told through the ages, its walls whispering the tales of a world long past. But beyond its historical and cultural significance, there's something else that the Colosseum leaves behind, a lesson in the passage of time. The Colosseum was once the heart of Roman entertainment, a stage for the greatest spectacles the world had ever seen. And yet, over time, as the empire shifted and changed, it became a relic, a reminder that all things, even the greatest of empires, eventually fade. But that doesn't mean they are forgotten. No, their legacy lives on, not just in the stories we tell, but in the spaces they leave behind. The Colosseum's legacy, in many ways, is not just about what happened within its walls, but what it represents. It represents the grand dreams of an empire, the power of human will to create something lasting, something that transcends time. It represents the stories of the people who lived and died for it, the lives intertwined with its history, and the enduring spirit of survival that even the smallest creatures, like the rats beneath its floor, have carried through the ages. So, as the Colosseum stands under the Roman sky, silent and still, it continues to echo with the legacy of its past. Its stone, worn and weathered, holds the weight of history, of power, of pride, and yet it remains a monument not just to the Roman Empire, but to all of us who come to stand in its shadow, to learn, to remember, and to find something timeless in its walls. Imagine, if you will, stepping back in time, back to the days when the Colosseum was not just a monument of stone, but a living, breathing part of the Roman world. The sounds of the bustling city fill the air, a constant hum of life as the mighty arena rises before you, its grand arches cutting into the blue sky. The sun casts long shadows across the sand, and the arena, so full of life and purpose, feels almost alive in itself, waiting for the next great spectacle to unfold. The crowds begin to gather outside, their voices rising in anticipation. They come from all walks of life, from the emperor's court to the common citizens, eager to witness the games that will unfold before them. The excitement is palpable, the air thick with the smell of roasting meats, the sound of music drifting from the stalls. In every corner of the Colosseum's outer walls, vendors sell their goods, cheap trinkets, fresh fruit and wine. It's a world filled with colour and noise, a world of excitement and anticipation. As the gates of the Colosseum open, the energy shifts. The roar of the crowd grows louder, a tidal wave of voices rising in unison. Gladiators, clad in their armour, step out into the arena, their faces set in grim determination. The clinking of their swords and shields fills the space, the sound as sharp as the tension in the air. Their steps echo in the arena, reverberating off the stone walls while the crowd watches, breathless, waiting for the clash of steel. In those moments, it's easy to imagine what it must have been like. The excitement, the tension, the sheer energy that filled the Colosseum as men fought for their lives, for honour, for survival. The smell of sweat and blood mingled in the air, the sound of swords striking shields, the shouts of the crowd as they cheered or jeered, depending on the fate of the fighters. For the gladiators, each battle was a chance to prove themselves, to survive for another day. For the people, it was a chance to witness the spectacle of life and death, to be part of something larger than themselves. The Colosseum, in its prime, was a place of grandeur, a place where emperors held sway and the fate of men was decided by the will of the crowd. The vast arena, the grand architecture, the ever-present excitement, it was a symbol of Roman power, of strength, and of the empire's enduring might. The Colosseum wasn't just a place for fighting, it was a stage for history itself, where each battle, each contest, became a part of the story that the Roman Empire told the world. But even in the midst of this excitement, there was a strange serenity to the scene. The movements of the gladiators, their precise steps and controlled strikes, were almost like a dance, slow, deliberate, purposeful. The arena, once filled with the noise of battle, had its own rhythm, a heartbeat of its own that pulsed through the fighters and the spectators alike. It's almost ironic, isn't it? How something so violent, so raw, could be so carefully orchestrated. The gladiators, though they fought for their lives, were also part of a larger performance, a show, a spectacle for the masses. And yet, despite the bloodshed, There was an elegance to the way the Colosseum functioned, as if it were part of a grand design that had been years in the making. Every move, every battle was part of a carefully crafted narrative, one that, at the time, seemed as eternal as the empire itself. And as we glance back, looking through the layers of time, we can almost feel the presence of that world, the clamour of the crowd, the heat of the day, the weight of the moment. The Colosseum in all its glory stands as a reminder of a time when men fought for more than just survival. They fought for the very essence of what it meant to be part of something greater. As the centuries pass, the Colosseum continues to stand as a symbol of Roman power, a monument to both the empire's triumphs and its eventual decline. And yet, in the midst of all this grand history, a quieter, more unnoticed victory plays out, one that is not sung by the crowds nor written in the annals of history, but instead is found in the smallest corners of the arena, in the shadows where the light rarely reaches. It is the story of the rats, those small, seemingly insignificant creatures who have quietly claimed victory in a world that never noticed them. The Colosseum, once a stage for grand battles and bloody spectacles, now stands in silent testament to the passage of time. The gladiators are long gone, the emperor's palaces reduced to ruins, and the crowds that once filled the arena with their roars and cheers have faded into memory. But the rats? They are still here, their small feet padding softly across the stone, their tiny eyes shining in the dim light, ever watchful, ever persistent. Their victory, though, is not one of grandeur or glory. It is a victory of survival, a quiet triumph that has played out beneath the very walls that once echoed with the clash of swords and the roar of the crowd. The rats have endured, unnoticed and uncelebrated, but undeterred. They have made this place their own, carving out a life in the quiet corners, in the unseen passageways, in the cracks of stone that were long ago forgotten by those who built the Colosseum. Every day they move silently through the arena, their small bodies navigating the same paths that they've walked for centuries. They slip between the columns, their paws skittering softly across the sand-strewn floor, finding morsels of food left behind by the spectators, crumbs from a meal long past. Their movements are graceful, almost imperceptible, a quiet dance through a world that no longer notices them, and in their silence, in their patience, they have claimed a victory that none of the great gladiators could ever have imagined. It's a strange irony, isn't it? While the mighty warriors fought for fame and survival, the rats simply endured. They didn't fight for glory or honour. They didn't crave the attention of the crowd or the favour of the emperor. No, the rats fought only for one thing: survival. And they succeeded, over and over again, quietly and without fanfare. As the years pass, as the empire fades into history, the rats continue to thrive in the shadows of the Colosseum. They are the true survivors, the ones who have adapted to the changing times, who have found a way to live in a world that has forgotten them. They don't need the spotlight, don't need the cheers or the glory. They have learned to live in the quiet, to find what they need without disturbing the world around them. Their victory is a small one, but it is no less meaningful. And perhaps that is the true lesson of the Colosseum. It wasn't just the great gladiators, the emperors, or the battles that defined this place. It was the quiet resilience of the small creatures, the ones who lived in the hidden corners, the ones who were content to survive, no matter what the world threw their way. The rat's victory is a reminder that sometimes the most enduring triumphs are not the loudest or most celebrated, but the ones that happen quietly, in the shadows, without anyone even noticing. So, as the Colosseum stands today, its stone worn by time, its battles long over, the rats continue their quiet victory. They have outlasted the gladiators, the emperors, and the grand empire that once stood at the height of its power. And in their silent existence, they remind us that survival, in its purest form, is a quiet and enduring victory. As the Colosseum stands in the heart of a city changing beyond recognition, the once thriving Roman Empire begins to crumble. The empire, once vast and unyielding, starts to show cracks, its power slowly slipping away as the winds of change sweep through the ancient world. The once great Roman legions, now fewer in number, no longer march with the same purpose. The mighty structures of the empire begin to fall into disrepair, and the world that once thrived in the shadow of Rome's glory begins to fade into the past. Yet in the midst of all this upheaval, there is a strange calm. In the quiet shadows of the Colosseum, life continues. The rats, small and unnoticed, remain. They have witnessed the rise and fall of emperors, the great battles fought within the walls of the arena, and now they watch as the empire around them slowly crumbles. The sounds of marching soldiers and the roar of the crowds fade, but the rats, ever persistent, continue their quiet existence, untouched by the chaos above. The Colosseum, once a place of power, of spectacle and grandeur, now stands as a monument to a different time. The gladiators are long gone, their swords rusted and their names fading from the pages of history. The grand events that once filled the arena with excitement have grown few and far between. Yet, even as the empire begins to disintegrate, the rats continue to thrive. Their world, small as it is, remains constant. They scurry through the dark corners of the arena, their tiny feet padding softly against the stone. Their movements are as rhythmic as ever, unhurried, purposeful, and persistent. They navigate the cracks and crevices of the Colosseum with the same practiced ease they always have, searching for crumbs left behind by the dwindling number of spectators. The sounds of battle, the cheers of the crowd, the grand moments of the Roman Empire, those are all gone. But the rats remain, their quiet lives continuing despite the empire's fall. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The mighty empire which once stretched across the known world, with all its grandeur, its achievements, its glory, slowly faded into history. And yet, here are the rats, small, unnoticed creatures, still surviving in the shadows of the great arena. While empires rise and fall, it is the quiet persistence of these creatures that remains unchanged. The rats didn't need the empire's power or the roar of the crowds. They simply needed to survive, to adapt to the world around them, and they did so with remarkable resilience. As the empire collapses, the world changes rapidly. The sounds of life outside the Colosseum shift. The once bustling streets are quieter, the markets less crowded. The grand palaces of Rome begin to fall into disrepair, and the legions of Rome, once the world's most formidable force, are no more. But still, the rats remain. In the dark corners of the Colosseum, they continue their quiet existence. In a world that is slowly slipping into the past, they have learned the art of surviving, of thriving, in the most uncertain of times. The rats don't know what the future holds, nor do they care. They don't need the empire's glory, nor the accolades of battle. Their survival is simple, unassuming and steady. While the empire fades and the world changes, the rats continue their quiet march through the ruins of a once great empire. They are the true survivors of Rome, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most patient, the most adaptable. And so, as the final whispers of the Roman Empire fade into history, the rats remain in the shadows of the Colosseum. Their tiny paws, their quiet movements, continue the rhythm of life that has always existed here, long after the empire has fallen. In the end, it wasn't the grandeur of the empire that endured. It was the quiet, relentless persistence of those who simply kept going, no matter the changes around them. As the days stretch into years, the once vibrant heart of the Colosseum slowly fades into a quiet, forgotten place. The crowds, who once filled the arena with their cheers and shouts, are gone. The gladiators, once the stars of this grand stage, have disappeared into history, their battles fought and won or lost, but no longer remembered by the masses. The sand of the arena, once stained with the blood of combat, now sits still and untouched, a silent witness to the passage of time. It's strange, isn't it? How something so loud, so full of energy and life, can gradually turn into something so quiet, so still. The grandeur of the Colosseum, once filled with the sounds of clashing swords, the roar of the crowd, and the heavy footsteps of the gladiators, now stands in silence. The seats, once filled with eager spectators, are empty. save for the occasional passerby who pauses for a moment to admire the stone that has withstood the ravages of time. The once polished stone is now weathered, worn by centuries of wind, rain, and the slow erosion of history. The arches, grand and imposing, still rise above the city of Rome, but they no longer serve their original purpose. There are no chariot races, no battles to the death, no grand spectacles. The Colosseum has become a shadow of its former self, a relic of a time long past. Yet, even in this quiet decay, there's a certain beauty to it. The soft glow of the setting sun casts long shadows across the empty arena, and for a moment you can almost hear the faint echoes of the past, the whispers of those who once filled this space with their lives, their hopes, and their fears. In the absence of the great shows that once defined this place, the Colosseum is left to settle into a rhythm of its own. The stone cools with the evening air, the wind gently rustling through the empty seats. The sound of footsteps, faint and distant, is all that remains to fill the silence. There is a stillness here, a quiet peace that lingers where once there was chaos and noise. Beneath the arches, the shadows seem to grow longer, as if the very structure of the Colosseum is holding onto its memories. The faintest creaks and groans of the stone can be heard as the building shifts with the passing years. Nature has begun to reclaim its hold on the great arena. Weeds grow between the cracks of the stone floor, and ivy climbs up the outer walls, twisting its way through the once pristine structure. The earth slowly reclaims what was once its own, and the Colosseum, once a monument to power and entertainment, now stands as a testament to time's ability to transform all things. But even in this quiet, there is something enduring about the Colosseum. It is a monument to more than just the bloodshed of the past. It is a symbol of survival, of resilience in the face of change. The very fact that the Colosseum still stands, even after the gladiators have long since gone, and the empire that built it has fallen into the pages of history, speaks to the lasting impact of this place. It has survived centuries of wear and tear, of neglect and decay, and still it endures. Perhaps in some strange way, this is the true aftermath of the Colosseum. Not the silence, not the emptiness, but the quiet endurance that remains. The Colosseum, though no longer filled with the clash of swords or the cheers of the crowd, continues to stand. Its stone, worn and weathered, carries the weight of its history, and in the stillness it tells a story, not of violence, but of resilience, of the passing of time, and of the quiet endurance that can be found in even the most forgotten places. In the quiet of the Colosseum, as the dust of centuries settles and the stone stands silently under the weight of time, there is a subtle truth that remains almost unnoticed. For all the grand battles, the powerful figures, and the empire that once reigned supreme, the smallest creatures have outlived them all. The rats, tiny and unassuming, continue their quiet existence in the shadows, weaving through the cracks of the great arena, their tiny paws making barely a sound as they move through the cold stone. It's almost a marvel, isn't it? How something so small, so often overlooked, can endure while the grandest empires and most formidable warriors fade away. The rats, though they are the least likely of survivors, have found a way to live, not by strength or grand ambition, but by simply being, by existing in the quiet spaces where the world's grand spectacle once unfolded. The rats don't need to fight for glory. They don't need the roar of the crowd or the glint of the emperor's favour. No, their survival is much simpler than that. They move quietly, slipping through the spaces between stone, their tiny bodies navigating the Colosseum's forgotten corners. They don't rush, they don't strive for greatness, they simply endure. They adapt. They find food where others see nothing. They seek shelter in the places most never think to look, and they continue to survive, day after day. In the fading light of the Colosseum, the rats can be found scurrying across the stone floor, their soft footsteps barely audible against the stillness of the arena. They don't fear the empty seats, the cracked pillars, or the silent sand beneath their paws. These things, which once were full of life and purpose, have become simply part of the world they inhabit. For the rats, this place has always been a world of shadows, of small, unnoticed corners, and it is here, in the quiet spaces, that they have thrived. It's a peculiar kind of survival, isn't it? The rats never had the grand speeches, the fame, or the recognition that the gladiators had. They didn't fight for honor. They didn't win medals or titles. Their victory is not a victory of battle or power, but of quiet persistence. They have endured because they have learned the art of patience. They have learned to live unnoticed, to move when the world around them is still, to find sustenance where it is left behind by others. And in a way, the story of the rats is a reminder of something important. The loudest and the strongest are not always the ones who survive. It is the quiet, the humble, the ones who adapt and endure, that often find a way to outlast it all. The rats, though small and often invisible to the world, are the true survivors of the Colosseum's long history. They have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of legends, and yet they remain. Small, silent, unnoticed, but enduring. The Colosseum, in all its grandeur, may be a monument to the power and glory of Rome, but it is also a testament to something else. It is a place where the smallest survivors, the ones who didn't seek power or fame, have found their way to endure. The rats, tiny as they are, carry with them the quiet resilience of a world that has changed beyond recognition. And in their continued survival, they remind us that sometimes the smallest creatures are the ones who truly inherit the earth. As the centuries pass and the empire fades into the shadows of history, the Colosseum, once the heart of Roman entertainment, begins to change once again. The grand spectacle of gladiatorial combat, the chariot races, the mock naval battles, these have all but disappeared. The crowds that once filled the arena, their eyes wide with anticipation and excitement, are now few and far between. The echo of the crowd's cheers has been replaced by an almost eerie silence, as the Colosseum's role as a place of entertainment slowly comes to an end. The once polished stone, worn smooth by the passage of time, has begun to show its age. Cracks line the walls, the once sturdy columns are chipped and weathered, and the grand arena, once so full of life and drama, now feels like a shadow of its former self. The air, once thick with the sounds of battle, now carries only the faintest whisper of history, the faint rustle of leaves carried by the wind. The last gladiators have long since fought their final battles, their names fading into the pages of history. The crowds have dwindled, their excitement replaced by indifference. The Colosseum, once the place where emperors ruled the fate of men, now stands as a relic of a bygone era. The sound of swords clashing, of shields meeting with a resounding crash, is now only a memory that lingers in the air, fading as the years go by. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The Colosseum, which once represented the pinnacle of Roman power and pride, now finds itself abandoned, its purpose forgotten. The very place that once echoed with the roar of the crowd now stands in silence, the empty seats a stark reminder of the empire that built it, but has now crumbled. The stone, still standing tall, tells a story not of victory or glory, but of the passage of time, a time when the Colosseum was the very heart of Rome's entertainment. As the sun sets behind the arena, casting long shadows across the stone floor, there's a certain stillness that settles over the Colosseum. The wind rustles through the empty stands, the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The sand of the arena, once stained with blood, is now a quiet testament to the battles that once took place here. The Colosseum, though no longer a place of grand spectacle, remains silent, steadfast, and eternal in its own way. The last days of the Colosseum as a place of entertainment are quiet, almost unnoticed. There are no grand final battles, no last great spectacles. Instead, the arena slowly fades into memory, a shadow of the grandeur it once held. The crowds have left, the gladiators have fallen into history, and the empire that built it has long since fallen apart. But the Colosseum remains, a monument to a time when it was the center of the world. And yet, there's something almost peaceful in this quiet end. The Colosseum may no longer host the battles or the bloodshed, but it has become something more. A place where history lingers in the stillness, where the echoes of the past can be felt but no longer heard. The last days of the Colosseum as a place of entertainment have passed, and now, as it sits in silence, it carries with it the weight of all that came before, both the glory and the sorrow, the victories and the defeats, all woven into the very stone. As the Colosseum sits silently in the fading light of the day, there is a stillness that seems to stretch endlessly into the horizon. The hustle and bustle of the Empire's grand days are gone, and in their place is a quiet reflection, a moment to think about the past and the resilience that has carried this monument through the ages. The stone, though weathered and worn by centuries of use, still stands tall. There's something quietly remarkable about it, isn't there? Even as the empire that built it fades into the history books, the Colosseum remains, its walls holding the whispers of the past. It's as though time itself has bent around this place, leaving it to endure when everything else has crumbled away. The battles, the glory, the crowds, those have all faded. But the stone, the structure, the very foundation of the Colosseum remains, a testament to the silent strength of endurance. It's almost ironic when you think about it. The gladiators, the emperors, the warriors and rulers, they all fought to be remembered. They sought glory, fame, and victory. And yet, it is not their names that echo in the walls of the Colosseum today. No, it is the silence that remains, the quiet endurance of a place that has outlived them all. The Colosseum may no longer be filled with the sounds of battle, but it is still here, still standing, still strong. The small, often unnoticed moments of resilience, the way the stone holds firm against the ravages of time, how nature slowly reclaims its territory with ivy and creeping roots. These are the things that tell the true story of the Colosseum. It's the quiet strength that isn't celebrated, the kind that doesn't need recognition, that has kept this great structure standing long after the empire has fallen. It is the unnoticed persistence of the Colosseum, as steady and enduring as the tide, that has given it a lasting place in history. In the soft light of the evening, as the air cools and the Colosseum stands against the backdrop of a darkening sky, you can almost hear the heartbeat of this place. It's the rhythm of survival, of waiting patiently through the ages, the sound of nature beginning to claim its space again, the rustling of the leaves caught in the breeze, the quiet movement of shadows. These are the sounds that fill the Colosseum now. They are the sounds of a place that has quietly endured, holding the stories of the past in its stone, without needing to shout them out loud. Perhaps that is the true strength of the Colosseum, not in its glory or the battles it hosted, but in the quiet resilience it embodies. It has stood through the rise and fall of empires, through the clamour of battle and the hush of silence. It has remained, not because it fought for survival, but because it simply existed, quietly and without fanfare, through everything the world threw its way. And as we stand here, in the fading light of the day, we can't help but reflect on that kind of strength, the quiet endurance of something that was never meant to be immortal, but somehow managed to become just that. The Colosseum, like the smallest creatures that once scurried in the shadows of its arena, reminds us that resilience often comes in the most unexpected forms. It is the silent, steady presence that continues long after the noise has died down, the weight of history held in the stillness. As we reflect on the grand history of the Colosseum, its towering arches, its bloody spectacles, and the fierce warriors who once stood in the arena, it's easy to forget the quieter, less celebrated side of history. The gladiators, the emperors, the roaring crowds, these are the names that come to mind when we think of the Colosseum. But what about the smaller stories? The ones that played out quietly, unnoticed, in the shadows of the arena? What about the unsung heroes, the ones whose lives weren't marked by glory or fame, but by survival? In the vast arena, amidst the dust and the blood, there were countless others whose stories never made it into the history books. They were not the gladiators, nor the emperors, but the people who lived in the quiet spaces, who quietly made the grand spectacle possible. The workers who built the Colosseum, the attendants who cared for the animals, the ones who swept the floors after the battles were over. These were the heroes who kept the Colosseum running day after day. Imagine, if you will, the steady hands of a caretaker sweeping the sand clean after each fight. The quiet rhythm of the broom against the stone, the gentle scrape of the bristles as they gather the remains of the day's spectacle. No applause for them, no recognition. They work silently in the background, keeping the arena ready for the next show. Their task is mundane, repetitive, yet essential. Without them, the Colosseum would not have been the spectacle it was. But their names are lost to time, their contributions uncelebrated in the grand narrative. Then there were the workers who maintained the animals that fought alongside the gladiators, those majestic beasts who played their part in the arena's bloodied history. The handlers, with their steady hands, would feed and care for the lions, tigers, and bears. They knew these animals better than anyone, understanding their moods, their habits. But they were not the ones who received the accolades. They worked in the background, ensuring the animals were ready for the arena, their quiet diligence overlooked in favor of the drama of the fight. It's ironic, isn't it? These people who did the hard work, who made everything happen, are the ones whose stories go untold. The gladiators received fame, the emperors lived in opulence, but it was the small workers, the unsung heroes, who kept the system in motion. They were the ones who understood the true rhythm of the Colosseum, its steady beat, the hum that moved beneath the surface, and while the spotlight shone on the gladiators, these quiet workers carried the weight of the arena. And then there were the quiet creatures like the rats, who scurried unnoticed through the cracks of the Colosseum. The arena's cleanliness was not just the result of human hands, but of countless tiny feet moving about, gathering crumbs, cleaning up the remnants of the day's events. While the battles were raging, while the crowds were roaring, these small creatures worked silently behind the scenes, their efforts going unnoticed. In their own way, they too were part of the Colosseum's hidden life, surviving in the shadows, their survival just as important as that of the gladiators themselves. These stories, though often forgotten, are no less important. The heroes who lived in the shadows, who worked in silence, are the ones who made it possible for the larger, louder stories to unfold. They are the unseen side of history, the ones who, despite their lack of recognition, played a vital role in the grand narrative of the Colosseum. Their lives may not have been filled with fame or fortune, but they were filled with purpose, a quiet purpose, moving steadily beneath the surface of the grand spectacle. And so, as we stand here, looking at the Colosseum today, it's worth remembering that history is not always about the loudest voices, the grandest battles, or the most famous figures. Sometimes it's about the quiet ones, the ones who never asked for attention, who worked in the background, who survived in the shadows. Their stories, though unseen, are no less significant, for it is they who held everything together when the spotlight was on someone else. As we pause for a moment to reflect on the Colosseum, its grandeur, its history, and its role in shaping the world around it, it's worth considering something that often goes unnoticed. The legacy of the Colosseum is not just found in the mighty gladiators or the emperors who once stood in its shadows. No, it is also found in the smallest, most unassuming things, the quiet, persistent forces that have endured long after the loudest battles have faded away. It's easy to overlook the power of the small, isn't it? The grand spectacles, the great warriors, those are the things that fill the pages of history, the things that everyone remembers. But if we take a closer look, we see that it is often the smallest things, the ones we rarely think about, that have the most enduring power. The humble workers who kept the Colosseum clean, the animals that were cared for and guided through the arena, the rats that scurried unnoticed in the shadows, all of them played a part in the survival and legacy of the Colosseum. The workers, though they never received fame or recognition, were the ones who made the arena run smoothly, who made it possible for the grand spectacles to unfold. They swept the sands, maintained the equipment, and ensured that the space was always ready for the next battle. Their work was repetitive, mundane even, but without it, the Colosseum would not have stood the test of time. It was in the quiet, everyday tasks that the true resilience of the arena was built. And what of the small creatures, like the rats, whose lives moved quietly in the shadows? They weren't part of the grand events, but they were part of the Colosseum's life. They helped clean up the aftermath. They scurried across the stone and sand, gathering the remnants of the day. Their presence, unnoticed and uncelebrated, was crucial to the upkeep of the Colosseum, and in their quiet persistence they survived long after the Empire had fallen. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The biggest, most dramatic moments in history often belong to the loudest voices, the ones that attract attention, the ones that fight for glory. But the true strength, the true legacy, lies in the smaller moments, the ones that don't need to be heard or seen to be significant. It is in the quiet persistence of those who work in the background, in the humble creatures who simply survive, that the real power lies. As we stand in the shadow of the Colosseum today, with its stone worn and weathered by time, it's clear that the legacy of this place is not just found in the grand battles or the fame of the gladiators. It is in the endurance of the small, in the quiet persistence that has allowed the Colosseum to remain standing. The rats, the workers, the unnoticed ones, they have left their mark just as much as the grand figures who once walked these stones. The legacy of the small is a reminder that power is not always about size or volume. Sometimes the smallest, quietest forces are the ones that endure the longest. It's in the unnoticed, repetitive tasks that true strength is found. It's in the way the Colosseum, once so full of life and grandeur, now stands in peaceful silence, bearing witness to the quiet, uncelebrated legacies that have shaped its story. And so, the next time we reflect on history, on the great empires and the grand figures who have shaped our world, we might also take a moment to think about the small things, the quiet forces that have endured in the background, because it is in those small, persistent actions that the real legacy lies. As we sit here, reflecting on the Colosseum, its grand battles and the countless figures who have walked its hallowed grounds, there's one thing that stands out, isn't there? This story, the one we've just travelled through, isn't one that is often told. It's the story of the unseen, the quiet, the persistent forces that often go unnoticed in the grand narrative of history. The gladiators, the emperors, the wars, they are the stories we remember, the ones written in bold letters across the pages of time. But what about the small stories? The humble workers, the unnoticed creatures, the quiet endurance that has shaped the very foundation of the Colosseum? Those are the stories that don't often make it into the textbooks, the ones that remain hidden in the shadows. It's easy to overlook them, isn't it? The grand stories, the loud moments, they demand attention. They fill our history books, our movies, our songs. But the quieter moments are the steady rhythms of everyday life. The moments that are filled with nothing but patience and survival are the ones that slip away, unnoticed. And yet, those are the moments that often hold the greatest meaning, the true heart of a place like the Colosseum. The workers who swept the sand, the caretakers who fed the beasts, the small creatures who moved through the cracks. They didn't ask for glory. They didn't demand recognition. Their actions, though mundane, were essential to the story of the Colosseum. Without them, the great spectacle would not have been possible. But these are the stories we don't hear, the ones that, while still vital, remain untold, hidden in the quiet corners of history. And perhaps that's the irony of it all. In a place so full of noise, so full of blood and glory, it's the quiet, unnoticed moments that truly carry the weight of history. The Colosseum stands as a symbol of Roman power, yes, but it also holds the stories of those who quietly carried that power, who kept the wheels of the empire turning without ever stepping into the spotlight. Their legacy, though uncelebrated, is just as important, maybe even more so. This is the story that rarely gets told, but that doesn't make it any less significant. It's the story of persistence, of survival, of the unseen heroes who, through their quiet acts, shaped the world around them. Their story doesn't come with the roar of the crowd or the clash of swords, but it's woven into the very fabric of the Colosseum, and that, I think, is why it's so important. As we stand before the Colosseum today, looking at its weathered stone, its silent grandeur, we're reminded of the quiet victories that have kept this monument standing. The empire may have fallen, the gladiators may have vanished, but the quiet, enduring forces, those are the ones that remain. And though their stories may not be the loudest or the most celebrated, they are no less powerful, no less meaningful. So, in the end, this story, the one we've shared, is one that has remained in the shadows, quietly surviving. It's a story that might not be told in grand speeches or history books, but it's a story that is vital. The story of the small, the unseen, the persistent. And in their quiet resilience, they remind us that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that go untold. As we draw this journey to a close, it's hard not to reflect on the theme that has woven its way through every corner of the Colosseum's story, the quiet strength of survival, the unexpected endurance of even the smallest and most overlooked forces. From the grandeur of the gladiators to the silent persistence of the rats, from the fleeting moments of fame to the enduring, unnoticed tasks that kept everything running. This story has always been about more than just the loud battles and the dramatic spectacles. It's about resilience. It's about the ability to adapt, to survive, no matter how unnoticed, no matter how small the effort. The Colosseum, with all its history and all its fame, stands as a testament not just to the empire that built it, but to the quiet endurance that often goes unnoticed. The workers, the creatures, the uncelebrated ones, they all played their part, carrying on in the background, enduring and thriving in the shadows of a world that demanded much, but gave little recognition in return. And so, as we look at the Colosseum today, weathered and worn, still standing after all these years, we see more than just an ancient ruin. We see a symbol of what it means to endure, to keep going when the world around you is changing, when the loudest voices have faded and the grand moments have come to an end. The Colosseum may no longer be the center of entertainment, but it stands as a quiet reminder that survival doesn't always require power, glory, or fame. Sometimes it's simply about finding your place, doing your part, and enduring through the quiet moments that no one else sees. In the end, it's the smallest things, the unnoticed creatures, the quiet persistence that prove the most enduring. They are the true survivors, the ones who don't fight for attention, but simply for survival. And perhaps that's what makes them the most powerful of all. So, as we leave the Colosseum behind, we carry with us a quiet lesson, a reminder that strength doesn't always come from the loudest battles or the brightest moments. Sometimes it comes from the stillness, the persistence, and the resilience to survive, even when no one is watching.